Right. Welcome to the Six Sigma Greenbelt session. Yeah, my name is Bhupinder. I've got 18 plus years of industry experience. I'm currently working with one of the organization. So in this entire training, we would be covering this entire training in 6 modules. The first module that we are doing at the moment is we are going to talk about evolution and introduction to Lean Six Sigma. In the next one, we will be talking about the entire phases of the Lean Six Sigma project. Lean Six Sigma project implemented in existing process is called as DMAC approach. So we'll be talking about the entire DMAC approach. This DMAC, the first module from the DMAC is define phase, in which we define what exactly is the problem that we want to improve. We look at the various voice of customer, and there could be 3 customers that we have. Voice of the process, which is the process owner, who's more interested towards financial improvement. Voice of the employees, who are more interested towards improving the processes and making it simpler for them, and then voice of the user, who wants to ensure that the quality is very high of the product. So any of these voices can drive and help me identify the right project that happens in define phase. Then we measure it. In the next module, we'll talk about the measure phase, in which we measure the extent of the problem. So we baseline the current process performance, and we look at the process capability. What is the process capable of delivering without us making any improvement? Are we going to, what is our confidence in the current process? Would we be having a 1% defect, 0.1% defect, 10% defect? How much defect we really have without making any improvement in the process, right? So that will happen in the measure phase. Then we move on to analyze phase, in which we analyze the inputs, the problems, which is the factors which is causing the problem to happen, right? So we would not, it's like going to a doctor. When you go to a doctor, if you have fever, the doctor will not give you paracetamol directly. He would not say that you need paracetamol because you have fever. He would look at the root causes because of which you have fever, right? So he would ask you, are you under stress? Do you have any kind of previous existing health issues, or are you under medication? Do you take alcohol? Like that, he would be asking some of the questions to identify the root cause of the problem. Similarly, in analyze phase, we would be identifying what is the root cause of the problem. Why is this problem happening? Why exactly we are not able to meet what the customer has specified? What are the factors which is influencing this problem, and controlling those factors, we should be able to make improvement on the business case that we have developed in the define phase, right? So that happens in the analyze phase, and then we move on to improve. Once we've analyzed the root causes, we make improvement on those root causes. We come up with a strategy on how do we go ahead and make improvement and sustain that. So sustaining comes in control phase, and then eventually, once we've sustained the results, we have got the sign off from the process owner that the real results have been delivered. We eventually document the results. We document how the process has to be handled in the future, so that doesn't go back to from where we have picked it up. From the improvements that we have brought in, it should not diminish over time. And then we overall close the project. That becomes the entire flow of DMAC approach. Let's get started with first module. In the first module, we'll talk about the evolution and introduction to Lean Six Sigma. So what is Six Sigma? What is Sigma? Let's first talk about Sigma. Sigma is nothing but standard deviation. Now, it's not a standard deviation to its true sense. What we mean by Sigma is the process capability. How much is your process capable of? If it is 6 Sigma, if you process 6 Sigma, then we would be having an opportunity of 3.4 defects per million, right? Per million is huge. Per million opportunities, we can have maximum 3.4 defects. That is your 6 Sigma process. Now, all that it means is how many standard deviations you can fit into the specifications given by the customer. So the customer gives out a target value. Now, he doesn't always give you just the target value. He also gives you the tolerance limits. Why he gives you a tolerance limit? Because it's a globally accepted factor that no 2 parts are going to be similar, right? Everything is going to be, every part which is getting manufactured or produced is going to be different from the other part, right? So no 2 parts are going to be similar. similar. You might or might not be able to make out the difference using your naked eye, but the difference is there. It's just that you require a better gauge to be able to find out the difference. Maybe much more granular level you would be able to find it out, but the difference is there. Let's take an example over here. So let's say you're a supplier and a car company comes to you. They say that manufacture nut bolt for me. Now, among the various of the specifications of, let's say, the strength of the nut bolt, the diameter of the nut bolt, there is one specification which we are taking over here for an example, and that is the length of the nut bolt. Now, the customer comes over here and says that I want the length of the nut bolt to be 6 inches long, plus or minus 0.3 inches. Now, in this situation, your low specification limit becomes 5.7 inches, which is 6 minus 0.3. And since he said plus or minus, so the upper specification limit becomes 6.3, which is 6 plus 0.3, right? Anything which you produce between these limits, that's 5.7 to 6.3, is good for the customer. Customer is going to accept it. However, anything which goes beyond that is a defect. Fair enough, there's a defect, so what? Defect would it would make you to do rework in the process. Now, rework itself is additional cost because you have to allocate your resources again. The raw material which got wasted, what about that? It's just an additional cost, right? And it's of no use. The manufacturer has to take that cost because he made a product which was defective and nobody is ready to buy a defective piece. There is just no use of a defective material, right? So that's what the aim of Six Sigma is. Six Sigma aims at reducing the variation to a level that entire variation of the process fits within the limits of the customer. At the moment, you might not have complete understanding of what is sigma and what is standard deviation, but then at a very high level, let's understand what sigma is. Sigma only talks about how many standard deviations can be fit within the upper specification and lower specification. If you can fit overall 12 standard deviations, that's 6 towards the upper side and 6 towards the lower side of the mean, then your process is capable of producing only 3.4 defects per million, right? And what is standard deviation? Standard deviation is nothing but the average distance of each data item from the mean. Right? I re-emphasize that once again. Average distance of each data set from the mean is your standard deviation. How much is your data deviating from the mean, from the target value, from the average, right? So that is standard deviation.
Right.
What is Six Sigma? It's a methodology, breakthrough methodology, which was developed by Bill Smith. Bill Smith was, at that point of time, he was working in Motorola, and he's credited as the father of Six Sigma. Now, one day, the story goes like this. One day, Bill Smith, along with his friend, was sitting in cafeteria of Motorola, and they were having a discussion to make processes more predictable, to take SPC, statistical process control, to next level and come up with much more predictable approach, come up with a process improvement approach. So that's how they started off with the journey of Six Sigma. It took a lot of years for Motorola to come up with the Six Sigma as official methodology. Now, let me ask you a question here. So Six Sigma was brought into the industry by Motorola. Motorola was a pioneer in introducing Six Sigma. They did pretty well. They saved a lot of cost with Six Sigma. But where is Motorola today? Right. Motorola got sold out to Google. Google really didn't find value in it, and they wanted to focus only on their software business. They sold it out eventually to Lenovo. A company got sold out 2 times, right? Where is it? What happened? Is it the failure of Six Sigma? Not really. It's not a failure of Six Sigma. It's a strategy failure. So they kept on focusing on the same product, and eventually the customers were not interested in that product, right? The customer were trending towards buying more smartphones. Even though the product which Motorola was coming up with was of very high quality, the cost of production was lower, they were having lesser number of defects. Does the customer really want that product or not? That's a question which has to be asked. Right, so it's not a failure of Six Sigma. It's Six Sigma will not deliver the results to the company alone. You require other methodologies as well. For example, blue ocean versus red ocean strategy. There are different other things in the market, and it's a combination of everything that has to be brought in. What is the fundamental definition of Six Sigma? The fundamental definition is the center of the process is away from the nearest specification by 6 standard deviations, right? If you have to bring it away by 6 standard deviations, there are 2 ways how you can do it. One, take away the upper specification or the lower specification, ensure that they are broad enough to have to be able for you to be able to fit 6 standard deviations within those limits. Is it really possible? You really cannot influence the customer specifications. It's a specification given by the customer. Customer is not going to change it. You can negotiate if you want, but I don't think it's going to be possible for the customer to relax the limits that they have set. Now, if they are not ready to budge the boundaries that they have set, what is the other alternate? Reduce the standard deviation so that you can now fit 6 standard deviations within those limits, correct? So that's what Six Sigma focuses on. It focuses a lot on reducing the variation. Origin of Six Sigma, this was coined by Bill Smith, who was an engineer in Motorola, as we discussed. It was started in late 1970s, where Motorola started experimenting with problem solving using statistical analysis, and it took around 17 years for Motorola to officially launch. Not completely 17 years, because it was, Motorola started experimenting with this in late 1970s, not early 1970s. So yeah, but it took a lot of years for Motorola to officially launch this program. Then it started growing in somewhere around early 2000, in late 1900, 1996, 97. Jack Welch, who was the then CEO of Six Sigma, then CEO of GE, he launched Six Sigma in GE. Now, he made it a mandate for the management positions, for anybody to be eligible for management positions, they need to have a Six Sigma certification, right? So 1998-99 Green Belt exam certification became the criteria for management promotions. And then 2003, Green Belt became the criteria for promotion to management roles, right? So this is how GE promoted it. Why is Six Sigma required? Earlier, the business model was, since the competition was limited in the market, you can afford to look at your cost price, which is the combination of your cost of good product, plus there is, of course, a cost of rework, cost of inventory wastages because of the defective products. Plus, you add profit on that, and that becomes your sale price. Today, can you really govern that? There's so much of competition in the market. The price is already given out. Price is there in the market, and you need to be competitive enough. Today, the model is price minus the cost, which becomes your profit. Now, if your cost is equal to the price, you have zero profit. Worse, if your cost is above the price, how long are you going to stay? Right. The only way to deliver more profits is to reduce the cost. And that is where Lean and Six Sigma comes into picture. Cost of poor quality. Let's look at the sum of the cost of poor quality here. There are 2 types of costs: cost of quality and cost of poor quality. What's the difference? Cost of poor quality is where you have to rework. The work that you have done has gone waste, and the raw material has got wasted. That has to be reworked. You have to do the work again. Wastages, rejects, rework. Customer has returned the material to you, and you have to either destroy it or you have to rectify it. All that becomes your cost of poor quality. Cost of quality is the cost which you incur to ensure that you deliver good quality. Six Sigma organizations, different organizations that have worked on or that have implemented Six Sigma. GE, Jack Welch, initially, who was the CEO of 3M, he had all 300,000 employees. He made it a mandate that all 300,000 employees must be Six Sigma certified. Then he moved on to 3M and pretty much implemented the same structure, same methodology in 3M as well. New CEO, who was Jack Welch from GE, he requires all 3M employees to become Six Sigma certified. We have Six Sigma in 2 Point, CSC, LG, Sun Microsystem, Elite Signals, EXL, IBM, Motorola, Boeing. Talk about the company, and today we have Six Sigma in those companies in various different organizations as well. It is rapidly increasing in healthcare, financial, military. It's increasing everywhere now. Earlier, the myth used to be Six Sigma can only be applied into manufacturing. That's a myth. I have done consulting work, and I know that Six Sigma can be applied or is applied in services, design, purchase, production, IT, M&S, HRM, quality, administration, management. Talk about any industry and you can apply Six Sigma concepts in that. Let's look at what you can lose by not implementing Six Sigma. If your process is, if you get to baseline your process and your process comes out at 3 Sigma, which doesn't sound too bad considering Six Sigma is industry standard. But look at this. Because of the bad word of mouth, or because of your not so great quality, you can have 66,807 defects per million opportunity. And with that, what would happen? The word spreads faster, right? You are in threat of having 25 to 40% of your sales go away to your competitors because of your quality issues. And look at Six Sigma. If your process is Six Sigma compliant, you will only be losing less than 1% of your sales. That's the difference. That's very high.
Right.
What does Six Sigma tell us? Six Sigma tells us, Six Sigma first of all can be implemented only into processes what we measure, right? If you don't measure, Six Sigma is a statistical approach. How can we apply statistics unless we know what is our performance and if we have not measured it? And they say that you would measure something which you would value. If you don't value it, you would not measure it, right? Typical results that we've got, companies that properly implement Six Sigma, they have seen profit margins grow 20% year after year for each Sigma shift. That is huge. Since most companies start at about 3 Sigma, I've seen companies that's starting below 3 Sigma as well. But most companies start at 3 Sigma. Virtually each employee trained in Six Sigma will return an average of $230,000 per project to the bottom line, right? Until the company reaches 4.7 Sigma, right? So that's again is huge. That becomes a big business case for companies to implement Six Sigma. Six Sigma results, companies like GE, they achieved on an annual basis, they have achieved $2+ billion saving. JP Morgan Chase, 1.5 billion. Motorola, 16 billion since inception. Johnson Johnson, 500 billion. Huge savings. Variation. Let's look at what is variation. So Six Sigma aims at controlling the variation. That's what we have spoken about some time back. It aims at getting the variation to reduce, or it talks about reducing the standard deviation. If we reduce the standard deviation, that indirectly we are saying that we have reduced the variation in the process. So higher Sigma, mind it over here, it's higher Sigma, not higher standard deviation. Higher Sigma is higher the Sigma level that we have, lower the standard deviation that we have, because you are able to fit high number of Sigmas within the specification limit without moving the specification limit apart, without getting them move further apart. And with this, we will be having better performance, fewer defects. So in this example, what you see on the screen is the yellow zone is beyond the lower specification and the upper specification limits. And this is an area marked in yellow as defects. And do you want defects? You really don't want. Reducing the variation, what has happened? Bring the process within the Six Sigma level, and everything is fitting into the lower specification, upper specification limit. You have 0 defects, which is, and not anything that you're not producing anything which is not meeting the customer specification. That's a great thing. That's something which you really want. Six Sigma methodology, what we would be learning in our session is DMAC approach. It's an innovation algorithm. So here we already have existing process and we want to improve that process. So in that we will implement the DMAC approach. DMAC approach, as we said, is define, measure, analyze, improve, and then eventually control. There's another one, design for Six Sigma. This is where you're implementing a new process and you're implementing you're building a new process with Six Sigma in mind. So that is DMA/DV, define, measure, analyze, design, and verify. Different phases that you have. As we said earlier, in define phase, we talk about what are the customer's expectations, what the customer really wants, and what are we going to improve. Look at the different customer expectations, take one problem area, that becomes your define. Measure, what is the frequency of the defects, how much defects we really have, baseline your process. Analyze, when, why, and where do defects occur. Find out the root cause. Improve, how can we fix the process? How can we fix the root causes to improve our problem that we aim at improving? Control, how can we make the process stay fixed? How to ensure that we don't go back to old ways of doing the process and having the similar kind of defects as we had in the past, how to stay fixed. The approach that we have is convert the practical problem into statistical problem, convert the statistical problem into statistical solution, and eventually convert the statistical solution into the practical solution. Six Sigma initiative, it integrates all these efforts, which is SPC. SPC is statistical process control, knowledge management, design of experiments, re-engineering, benchmarking. ISO 9000 is nothing but the quality management system, problem-solving teams, and strategic planning. The path for Six Sigma, we are starting over here with yellow belt. So you are taking the first step towards Six Sigma. The yellow belts are generally the people who are working inside the team to bring in the improvement. Then we have the green belt moving up. From green belts are generally the project leads of small projects. Then black belt, they undertake complex cross-functional projects. Master black belt, they mentor all the belts, and they identify the real pain areas. They identify which project has to be prioritized. They pretty much work for a strategic level, and they train people on Six Sigma concepts as well. Six Sigma challenges and misconception. The biggest misconception which I can point out over here is it is only for manufacturing. It is absolutely not for manufacturing. Ask me, I have done Six Sigma consulting work for IT, ITES, manufacturing, healthcare. Talk about any company, any industry, and it can be implemented over there. Yes, it started, both Six Sigma and Lean, they started with manufacturing. It is easier to implement in manufacturing. Doesn't mean that you can only implement in manufacturing. So that becomes your biggest challenge and misconception. There are other challenges, other misconceptions which we have, like proper implementation needs a statistical genius. Not at all. You just need to be good and well versed with the tools and techniques. We have good tools and techniques which can be used, and those tools and techniques can give you the similar results. You need not be a statistical genius to be able to read those results which we get in the tools and techniques like Minitab and bring on improvements. Of course, you still need to have out-of-box thinking, right, to come up with the improvements in the process. Here is a look at some misconceptions about Six Sigma and some challenges to Six Sigma deployment. So stakeholder support. Without the stakeholder support, you cannot succeed in Six Sigma. Why? Because it is always a top-down initiative. I have seen quality working when the management commitment is there. Without the management commitment, people tend to deviate from the quality work, right? And that is why we always say that Six Sigma initiatives are top-down initiatives. It needs to be driven by the top leadership. Employees in a company can talk about Six Sigma deployment only when the top leadership supports it. Without the top leadership, it just won't be successful. Measurement system has to be crisp. Six Sigma deployments are fed on regular doses of data. Now, everything is based on data. What will happen if your data is incorrect? Your process baseline will be incorrect. The judgments that you will be taking is going to be incorrect, and eventual results are going to be incorrect, right? Incapable measurement system would lead to bad data, and bad data would lead to bad decisions. Analysis paralysis. Analyzing a piece of data is good, but spending hours and hours and using variety of tools to extract some piece of information will lead to analysis paralysis syndrome. Have a time-boxed approach. Stay focused. Ensure that you complete your analysis within a specified time period. Communication. Agreed, Six Sigma is a top-down approach, but it will be process resources who will decide the fate of the deployment, right? Resistance from the level 1 and level 2 employees arise only when the purpose of Six Sigma deployment is not well communicated. What is the purpose? Why are we doing this? How is it going to benefit the level 1 and level 2 employees is very important for us to communicate it to them. In summary, Six Sigma is amalgamation of lean, that is waste elimination, and Six Sigma, which is variation reduction. Six Sigma approaches are deployed through projects supported by top leadership. Enough investment needs to be made on the model before companies adopt Six Sigma deployment approaches. Six Sigma is not for weak-hearted, because of course you would be having a lot of discussions on the table, a lot of resistance. Any change which, you might have seen this. Any change that you try to bring into the system, people are going to resist that. And with Six Sigma, be assured you're going to bring a lot of changes. So it's not for weak-hearted for sure. Successful Six Sigma implementation needs good measurement system. Six Sigma can be applied to most disciplines, as we discussed some time ago, with an industry and most businesses units within an organization. Financial results are the only perfect measure of how project success is measured. Always talk in terms of dollars. Stakeholder support, measurement system, excessive analysis, and poor communication are challenges to successful Six Sigma implementation and needs to be taken care of. Right, so the roadmap that we will talk about the define phase, measure, analyze, improve, and control. In the next module, we will talk about the define phase in detail, and that's where we'll get started with the define phase.
All right, so and that completes us with the first chapter, which is the introduction that we wanted to do. And next is the define phase. So we'll get started with the define phase. Every time when we move to the next phase, what we're going to do is we're going to do the revision. So this slide that you see over here, there you will see it probably 5 times, right? Every time when we move into the next chapter, we will talk about what have we covered so far, what is the meaning of that, how does it apply in the real life, and what are we going to do in the current chapter, right? So that's what we're going to do. 5 next chapters: define, where we define what the problem is; measure, where we find out what is the extent of the problem, how much is the problem right now; analyze, what is causing the problem; improve, how can I make improvement? I know what is causing the problem now, but how can I improve it? How can I ensure that I get rid of this problem? And I don't want to go back to my erstwhile habits of performing in an unoptimized manner. How can I stay controlled? I have made the improvement, but I don't want that improvement to go away. That is the control stage, right? The last stage.
In the define phase, there are different activities which we will be covering, and the tools. So let me give you a snapshot of what are the activities and the tools that we will be covering during this module. We would review the project charter. Now, in define phase, the main deliverable that we have is to prepare a project charter and give confidence to our process owner or the sponsor, saying that why this particular project has to be done. Is this worth the investment? What is the business case? Why this project should be done? And what is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? All that combined together makes a project charter. So we will talk about what project charter is and how this is prepared. Eventually we'll review the entire project charter. So that's one of the activity. We will basically define the project that has to be done, why it has to be done, get an approval for that, and get it documented what are we trying to achieve with that project, right? So that's pretty much from a 100 feet level perspective, we can say that that's what is done in define phase. So we will validate the problem statement and the goal. We'll validate what is the voice of the customer. Why are we looking at the voice of the customer or voice of the business or voice of the employee for that matter? At times, whenever you want to do a project, you're right now getting trained on Lean Six Sigma, and eventually you might be moving into the process improvement space. So you would be required to do projects for business improvement. A lot of times you would be told what is the project that you need to do. So you would be told about the pain area in the business, and that becomes an easier opportunity to pick up to do a project. However, at times you might not be aware of what is the project that has to be done. Now, in that situation, you would need to find out what is the right candidate for the project. How do you find out what is the right candidate for the project? You need to collect the voice of the customer, that is the user of your product or the service, and voice of the business or employee. Now, business is, process owner is always going to talk about in terms of financial improvement. So he or she is more interested towards the finances. Voice of employee, inside the process, your employees will give you information, which is the pain area inside the project or the process that you need to focus on. Identify all these three voices, and you will have pipeline of projects that you can do, and then you can prioritize them. You can find out which is the first one that you need to do, right? So that's how you can prepare the pipeline. Then we will prepare the communication plan. So once we have started the project, when and how do we manage our stakeholders? How do we communicate to them? When do we communicate to them? What is the communication model? Eventually, we go ahead and select and launch the team. Who are the right candidates for your team? And the right candidates for the team would be the people who are experts in your in the process where you're trying to make an improvement, right? So have SMEs, not really experts in statistics or not really experts in Six Sigma, but you need experts in that process. So select them and then eventually launch the team. Develop the project schedule, prepare a high-level Gantt chart or whichever tool that you want to use for managing the project schedule. Understand the different various important milestones, prepare the entire project schedule, and towards the end, we'll complete the define gate. We'll talk about what the things that we do in define gate in a short while towards the end of the define phase. The tools that we have, the first primary tool that we have is we have Project Charter, right? What is it that we want to do? What is the business need? Why do we want to do it? And what is the goal that we want to achieve with this particular project? In order to identify what is it that we want to do, we might have to look at voice of the customer and the Kano analysis. We also prepare the SIPOC map. SIPOC is supplier, input, process, output, and customer. This is prepared for us to understand the end-to-end view of the process, to look at from how the value is flowing inside the process. Then we also prepare the RACI and the quad charts. RACI is nothing but responsibility, accountability, consulted, and informed. We have a stakeholder analysis in which we analyze different stakeholders who are supportive of your project, who are not supportive of your project, what exactly is the support that you're getting for your project, what are the different needs of stakeholders that you need to manage, that we analyze in the stakeholder analysis. We prepare the communication plan, and then we also have the timelines, milestones, and the Gantt charts, right? So let's move forward and discuss about the key objective. Key objective is to define what the project is going to achieve or what the project is all about. Key deliverables, completed project charter and high-level process map. The roadmap is we need to make sure that the project leader and the project sponsor are in alignment with the business strategic imperatives, scope, improvement goals, timelines, and estimated benefits. All these details need to be put in order to prepare the project charter. Then we launch the team. Project team needs to be chosen, need to identify who are the SMEs who can contribute in your project, because at different intervals you would need to hold a lot of brainstorming sessions. Only if the people are experts in the process, they would be and understand the end-to-end view, they would be able to give you the inputs. And if it's a cross-functional project, then you need to identify the SMEs from all the functions in which your project spans across, and eventually launch the team formally. Prepare a SIPOC, which is a high-level process map, right from the supplier till the output, till the customer rather, which talks about how the value is flowing inside your process. And then finally, we'll have a toolkit review, which is conducted with sponsor, black belt, and project leader, communicating with them the details of the project, what is the goal of the project, what is it that we are trying to achieve, how much of benefit they can expect. Now, expected benefits is at a very high level. It's not necessary that you will be exactly delivering the same benefits. At a high level, you need to tell to them that what is the expected benefits that they can achieve. Why we cannot be accurate about the benefits at this stage? Because we have not baselined the process. We don't even know the data that we have accumulated or that we have gathered is accurate or not. Data analysis, the data stability analysis, the baselining, all that has to happen in the future. And of course, if you don't know the solution, how can you come up with the exact, exact output or exact goal? You don't know about the solution at the moment, so you won't. It's going to be very at a high level the goal that you have prepared, right? The business benefit that you're expecting. When we are preparing the project charter, these are the components that we need to have in the project charter. Project charter needs to have business case, that is why the project has to be done. What are the consequences of not doing the project, right? So if you don't do it, what is the consequence? What is it that we are going to lose if we don't do this project? What is the problem statement? Problem statement is the pain in the project. It could be you're having too many defects. It could be that your customers are not happy with your product. It could be that your competitors are overtaking you. It could be that your cost of production or cost of operations is much higher than and your company is not able to make profits. What exactly is the pain? What does not meet the customer's requirement? What exactly is it that we are not meeting, and the customer is not happy about that? Goal statement, improvement that the team is seeking to accomplish. Then the scope. It's very important that we define the accurate scope over here and keep it time bound. It should not be it should not be a huge scope. Normally what we say is that Six Sigma project should not last more than 6 months. Otherwise, your team or your process owner will start losing interest in the project, right? So it's the same thing, right? You want to boil the entire ocean once or 1 gallon at a time. Try to do it 1 gallon at a time, which is much more manageable. Boiling the entire ocean at once, even after 1 year, you will see that the temperature has not risen, and slowly your stakeholders start losing interest in the project. Milestone. What are the different milestones that we have? Project plan with the dates, and the project team, where we will document the team members and the RACI. This is a sample of the project charter. So this is how the project charter looks like. Now, of course, your organization might be having a slightly different templates. Every organization have different templates which they follow for the project charter. Some of them have more details, or some of them might be having slightly lesser than details than what is depicted over here. This is just a template. The templates which your organization might be having are called as the organizational process assets, right? So you can utilize any of your process asset, and this does not mean that this is a this is a standard template which we recommend you to use. This is an example template, and if you come across a different template in your organization, don't be scared. It's just that they have modified it to meet their own requirement. In this template, what we are recommending is you should have a business case, opportunity statement, the goal statement, that is what exactly are you trying to achieve, and what will be the expected benefits. What is the project scope? What is the process start date and the end date, in scope, out of scope? The different project plan where you have the milestone details listed, and the team members. Of course, the commitment percentage is also listed over here, so that the process owner gets to know that how much time each individual needs to devote, and he can give a commitment of giving that much time period to the team members to devote for your project. Project charter, always remember, is dynamic. Now, in certain places, when you're handling a project of, it depends upon what kind of project that you're handling. Now, if you're handling a project management plan, PMP, if you're going as per the PMP, or if you're handling a large-scale project, a project charter would not be dynamic. Here, from Six Sigma perspective, it is very dynamic because you have not prepared detailed project plans here. You have not prepared a scope management plan. You have not prepared the, any of the subsidiary management plans. All those are not prepared, and it is coming out of, all the things are, the high level details are coming out of project charter. That is why this project charter remains dynamic for Six Sigma project. Now, how it remains dynamic, as in when you get more information, you get more clarity about the goal, you get more clarity about the improvement that can be expected of the project, and that needs to be changed, right? So it becomes dynamic. It becomes appointment of the champion. Members are listed and their roles are defined. A black belt, who's the mentor, is defined defined, is chosen, and he clarifies the project rationale with the champion. Champion is another one who gets involved in the project. Now, don't worry if in your organization you don't have a champion. It pretty much could be a person. It pretty much is a person who's sponsoring your project, so that's fine. It is crucial to describe the project title. Project title should allow others to understand the purpose of the project at a high level. Major issues and the objective of the project. The major issues that we see is, mentioning the purpose of the project. Some people don't really mention the purpose of the project in detail. Explain why your team would select this project as a problem area. Get everybody aligned to the purpose of the project. Define the parameters determining the success of the project, and actual project. What exactly is actual project all about? Some of the other major issues that we have is stakeholder commitment, mentioning the beneficiaries and the final outcome, explaining the different goals and objectives of various stakeholders, the expected results of the project, will influence whom and how, and describe the different source of resources. We also there would be some skills and knowledge which is required for this project, and based on that we select the team members. So skill required, for example, it's just listed over here as an example, so it's you might require more number of skills for your project. Now analytics, there might be certain person who's very good in analytics and you have chosen that as a potential person for your team. Leadership, communication, so based on that you have selected some of your team members. Project team is formed which contains a black belt who will, now it's not necessary that the black belt is alone who's leading a project. Black belts lead a high net worth or cross-functional projects. It might be a green belt who's leading a project. So it depends upon what kind of project that you have. The leader must have sufficient training in Six Sigma because he's the one who would be doing all the analysis, all the statistical analysis. And if he doesn't have good knowledge, he would not be self-sufficient to be able to understand what is the data requirement, how much of data has to be collected, what data has to be collected, how the data has to be collected. All this knowledge, all this comes from the knowledge and sufficient training in Six Sigma, right? So the leader has to have good sufficient training in Six Sigma. Six Sigma teams must have leadership from two people, that is the champion and the black belt and the green belt. Now, if you have a green belt, he often is getting mentored by a black belt because he is not completely thorough with all the tools and techniques of Six Sigma. He requires mentorship. He might be having theoretical knowledge, but practically he might not have complete knowledge about handling the entire project, right? So he generally gets mentored by the black belt. And the team leader selects to help the champion select other team members of the project. A team should be cross-functional if your project is cross-functional and familiar with what Six Sigma is all about, not necessarily familiar with all the tools and techniques of the Six Sigma, right? Team, as I said, BB is required to be on the project full-time. The team should also include the green belt if it's a green belt project. Now, it's not a mandate that your team should have a black belt and a green belt. It depends. If it's a cross-functional project and if it's a project which is of a net high, it's going to deliver higher value, probably of $500,000 or $1 million. And depending again upon your organization, what are the rules that they have defined, it's a black belt which is full-time involved in the project. He is leading the project, right? And green belt might not be involved at all. It's a project done by a black belt, and the team members are the yellow belt in that situation, who are who might be certified as yellow belt to be associated with them, or they might just be team members from operations giving them sufficient information. There's no hard and fast rule over there. In larger team, coordination is very difficult. That's something which is which we need to remember. Often the team members often the team that we recommend for Six Sigma projects is not more than I would say not more than 8. 6 is desirable. BB educates team members to ensure awareness.
Then we follow the RACI model. When we select the team, after that we follow the RACI model. It is very helpful for the team to come into the common understanding of who does what, who's accountable for what, who's responsible for what. It's it's helpful for the team when deciding what their resources needs are and how they will utilize these resources throughout the life cycle of the project. It, of course, does not involve an overview of all the key stakeholders. It's, stakeholders are some of the people who are not even the inventors, or they are not doing anything in your project. They are pretty much going to be beneficiaries. So it's not an overview of all the key stakeholders. It's an overview of the people who are involved in getting the project done. Determine which stakeholders are essential for success during different stages of the project. It also does not do that, and it also does not identify the role of each stakeholder.
Okay.
Right. This is how the RACI model looks like. RACI model is different project phases and who's accountable and who's responsible to do what, who would be informed and who would be consulted. Now, identifying the stakeholders, there are two types of stakeholders. We have external and internal. Often the stakeholders are also categorized in three categories, three I's: invested, invented, and impacted. Right? Who's going to be impacted with your project? It could be cross-functional teams who might have to make adjustment to their processes because it's it's not outside project that you're doing. It's a internal for your own company or for a client that you're doing. You need to be very sure about, is it going to impact the working of any other any other function, which could be a risk, right? It could be a risk for your entire project. If you don't identify it, you make changes, and downstream or upstream process or function gets impacted, the entire process, entire change might backfire. So it's very important that you identify all the stakeholders. From the broader perspective, they're categorized into two groups: external and internal. Now, we have spoken about the project charter. Let's move forward towards identification of the VOC. What is VOC? It is voice of customer. There could be three voices that we identify: voice of customer, voice of a user, and voice of business. Voice of customer is voice of, it's voice of user. Voice of business is voice of process owner or the sponsor. And voice of employee is the third one, where the employees give you the information regarding what is the improvement that needs to be brought in to the project. This can include variable data such as the lower specification limit, upper specification limit, and the target value. Voice of customer is voice of, it's voice of user. Voice of business is voice of process owner or the sponsor. And voice of employee is the third one, where the employees give you the information regarding what is the improvement that needs to be brought in to the project. This can include variable data such as the lower specification limit, upper specification limit, and the target value. Now, the customer, let me take an example over here to explain this specification limits. It's accepted factor in statistics and in normal manufacturing or anywhere. It's a globally accepted factor that no two parts are similar. Whether you might be able to make out the difference using your naked eye, or you might not be able to make out the difference using your naked eye, but there is a difference. Let's take a small example here. Let's say you are approached for process improvement by one of the company, one of the manufacturer, and they manufacture nut bolts for, let's say, Toyota. So they are that's a very small example that I'm taking over here. They are manufacturing a nut bolt, and they are a supplier of Toyota for their for their spare part needs. Among various other specifications of, let's say, how strong it has to be, what material has to be used, the diameter of the nut bolt. I'm just taking one example over here of one specification. Let's say they say 6 inches long. The nut bolt has to be 6 inches long. Now, if they say 6 inches long, they would not say that becomes a target value. They also give you thresholds within which, if you manufacture, it's acceptable for them. So they say, let's say plus or minus 0.03, right? So those become your threshold limits, and those threshold limits, limits I call as, if 6 plus 0.03 becomes your upper specification, 6 minus 0.03, which is 5.97, becomes your lower specification limit.
right? The customer may specify only one specification limit, and the target value is not necessarily the midpoint of the specification, right? It might happen that way. Don't assume this value. Always ask the customer for the target value if the same is not given in any kind of documents. The voice of customer may also involve the attribute specifications such as number of, color of, or ppm rating, etc. What is important over here is that voice of customer provides the specification limits. This is not the same as the voice of process. Now, why it is not same? Your process might not be capable to deliver the customer's requirement. For example, the customer said, I want 6 inches long nut bolt plus or minus 0.03. But your machine has such a setting that you are not able to manufacture that way, and your target value itself is close to what the customer specified, but your data is it's pretty much clustered within plus or minus 0.07. Now, it's centered to what the customer really wants, but there are a lot of defects because there are a lot of data which is going below the lower specification, a lot of data which is going above the upper specification limit. Right, so it's not the same. That is your voice of process, where the process is saying, I have higher variation what the customer requires. There are two ways of getting it sorted out. One, reduce the process variation, ensure that the process is centered and the variation is reduced to meet your customer requirement, or increase the customer specification. Now, can we really increase the customer specification? I doubt. It might not happen. The customer might not agree to it. Even if you go to negotiate with him, the customer might, say that I have hundreds of other vendors. Can you deliver this or not? I will go to my other vendor and get this thing done. You tell me if you can do it or not. So it's not really up for negotiations at a lot of times, right? Specification limits is something which you really cannot do much about. It's already stated. It's already specified. Once a process is something which you need to ensure that you control. You need to ensure that you control the defects and make your process much more capable. So the voice of process describes the width of the data and can change with every new data point. In other words, the LCL and the UCL are the formula whose values are changing to describe the process behavior. The specification limits are constant unless the customer informs of a change. The voice of customer will be referenced and verified throughout the project and ultimately at the closing of the project and handoff of the project process owner. What are the different sources of voice of customer? Your voice of customer can come from the complaints which the customer is given out after using your product, different complaints, different service issues, surveys, you send out different surveys to your customers and they respond to it. So based on that also you would be able to get the certain data. Quality issues, delivery issues, customer scorecards, marketing research, data studies, audit, past decision behavior, technology research. Based on that, your customer might be saying that, all right, your product is not technologically advanced. Focus group or interviews, right? So any of these can give out the voice of the customers. Customer needs, wishes, desires, mandates, attitudes are dynamic. It keeps on changing. So you need to keep on going back to your customers on a regular interval to be able to check do we have anything which is new, something new which is coming up and the customer is desiring a change. Keeping up with the trend and predicting behavior separates the best and the better products, processes, and services, right? Now, source of existing customer data. There are some sources of existing customer data. We have customer surveys, complaints, executive level discussions, benchmarking data. All these become, very important data that you need to look at when considering, your voice of customers. And so this becomes your voice of the customer. What is your CTQs that we have? CTQs would be converted into a measurable number. So for example, the quality percentage, the CSAT data, that is your CTQs. Who is the customer? If you have to ask this, if you have to identify who's your customer, ask 5 basic questions. Who does he, she think is critical to quality? Who speaks for the customer? What are the processes involved? Who can help define the issue, and who is the customer? If you answer these 5 questions, you would be able to identify the project CTQs. Establish the voice of customer to CTQ. Now, establishing the voice of customer to CTQ, as I mentioned, that CTQ is what the customer really mentioned. For example, the customer said that the price has to be lower.
of the product or the quality has to be higher. Convert the quality into CTQ. Zero defects becomes your CTQ, critical to quality. The delivery has to be on time. What does that really mean? Convert that into measurable number, 99% on time. Price has to be lower, less than $0.05, right? So conversion of what the customer really said to a measurable number using which you can really find out your process variation, your process adherence to the customer's requirement. Now, scoping the project scope definition is the boundary within which the Six Sigma team will work. It ensures that the team focus on the biggest problem, the best opportunity, process scope properly and achieve 70% of the benefits rather than chase after the 100% of the benefits and then fail. Improve scope can undermine a project and even make it fail. Larger scope should be divided into smaller and realistic scope. As I said earlier, when I was talking about the scoping, always ensure that there is a golden rule about it. The project should be scoped in such a way that you should be able to finish this within 6 months, not more than 6 months. And always remember, you don't want to boil the entire ocean once, boil 1 gallon at a time. Right. Suggestions that we have for understanding the scope of Six Sigma projects: check other projects affecting the project being scoped, clarify the project expectations, always focus on the finances, keep time in mind. As I said, 6 months. Keep the project from crossing boundaries. So when we talk about the process mapping, the process mapping is you're delivering certain value to the customer. What are the inputs which you get when you have to do the process mapping? What are the inputs that you get? How exactly, what is the process flow? What is the value chain, and what is the process steps that are followed to prepare the value and then deliver it to the customer? What is the output which goes to the customer? So effectively, this is how it looks like. X's is the inputs of the process, then steps to convert this into a value which gets delivered to the customer in form of the output, right? So that's how you map the process. High-level process mapping is done in form of SIPOC. SIPOC is supplier, input, processes, output, and customers. Project metric that we have, a selection of the project metric is always very crucial element of the project charter. It reflects the voice of the customer and the voice of the business, right? Business case, why this project should be done. What is it? What would happen if we don't do this project? It is the purpose of developing a business case is to identify the potential benefits of committing time and resources to the project. Finally, we need to take an approval of the project. Now we have developed the project charter. We need to get it approved. The BB and the champion should present the project charter, business case, preliminary project plan, a request for financial support, and a request for reviewing and approval. If the project is approved and the resources allocated, the team continues through the define phase. If not, the executive team asks the BB and the champion to rework on the charter, right? So the charter first has to get approved before you continue with the define phase. The focus of the meeting should be to help the members of the executive team learn from the findings reported by the project team. The project team will prepare a final report on the lessons learned when it completes a project. Now, the project plan that we have is the MBB, the BB and the champion develops the preliminary project plan into a detailed project plan. You might or might not have, again, all these roles prepared. So it's, again, a guideline, not necessarily has to be implemented in all the cases, in all the companies, in all the projects. The project plan structures the project info into steps, schedule, milestone, deliverables, goals for the 5 phases. What are the 5 phases? Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control.
All right, so now with the basics covered of the define phase, let's get into more details now, right? So let's get into details of understanding what is additional content that we have in the green belt. Right, so green belt, when you're doing green belt, you need to be empowered with so much of knowledge that you would be able to at least go ahead and define the project completely on your own. Yeah, I understand for analyze phase or for improve phase, you might need mentorship, right? So you would require mentorship to be able to conduct the statistical tools because that's something which you have been newly introduced in. And that's the expectation which every company has. They don't expect you to do all the tools yourself. Yeah, they expect you to do it, but then the validation of it, the verification of it, and the mentorship is always done by the black belt, right? So don't worry, you're not on your own. There will be black belts in your organization who will help you out. And if there are none, if you're working in a small organization where you don't have a black belt to mentor you, don't worry, it's okay. You can refer back to me. You can contact me, and I would be more than happy to mentor you for your projects, right? Moving ahead with the more finer details about the define phase and getting into the details so that I empower you to be able to get your project defined in a appropriate manner and completely. Let's get into more details now. How when we define, we spoke about this. So what is define? Define is where we define the problem. We want to understand what is the problem where we want to make an improvement on, right? Who is going to give me the problem, right? It could be the process owner. He might just come and say that this is a problem that has to be improved, or this is a problem that I'm facing. Can you please help me out with that? Generally, the basic approaches that we have for the project selection are when it is bluntly obvious, when it's you're not meeting a critical, crucial a KPI or a metric which you have to deliver to the customer. And it's very obvious that you have so many defects coming up and the customer is not happy with your performance. It's bluntly obvious, and you need to go in and do that project, right? That kind of projects generally get assigned to internal resources, and a lot of times the consultants get involved in helping work on those kind of projects as well. Second is, if in case, now it's not always going to be the situation where you have a bluntly obvious case which needs to be worked on. Let's say you get hired in a company, you're working in that company. First 2-3 years, you would be able to optimize the performance, and there would not be much of opportunities left at that point of time, right? Which are obviously coming up in front of you and saying that, okay, hey, this is the biggest problem that I'm facing. Can you please work on it? At that situation, you need continued work. You need, it's not that your work in the organization is only going to be for 2-3 years. You need to be improving the processes on a continued basis. In that situation, how would you identify? You can have brainstorming approach where you brainstorm with the SMEs and find out what is, what's a project, what is the problem, which can be, as we spoke earlier, which can come from the customers, which can come from the employees or the process owner. Brainstorm with them and identify what are the further opportunities. You can have further structured approaches as well, where the projects based on organization data are taken up. This provides a direct plan to affect core business metrics that have bottom line impact, right? So any of these three measures can be utilized to come up with the project candidates, and then you need to prioritize those project candidates. If you if you need help on that, feel free to approach your black belts, because black belts use metric. That's a metric which they use to identify which is a project that has to be done first, right? So you need to have good amount of projects in the pipeline before approaching your black belt and saying that these are the different opportunities, which one should I do first? And if it's obvious, if it comes up and, and if you can do the analysis yourself, where you're able to find out that which one has the biggest opportunity to deliver to the business, not in terms of just the dollar of delivery, but lesser cost and high benefit, right? So it's cost benefit analysis. And if you're able to do it, go and do it yourself. If you need help, approach your black belt, and he will help you out using his metric. All right, so project selection, the core components that we have is the business case. You need to have a business case. End of the day, you are doing a project and the project is going to utilize some money. When the project is utilizing the money in the business, you need to ensure that the money is wisely utilized. And the benefit is greater than the investment which you're making in the project. So business case has to be there. It might be just money, or it could be the strategic objective of the organization. Project charter has to be prepared, which is more detailed version of the business case. This document further focuses the improvement effort. Now, we have spoken about the project charter earlier as well, and I'm going to cover a few more details of the project charter in subsequent slides. Benefit analysis, what's going to be the benefit? Why should you do this project? What will happen if you don't do this project? Right, so that's how we select the project. Project selection, who governs? the governing committee. These are the guidelines that we have, not necessarily that this is how it will be done. It depends upon your organization, depends upon who are the people that are involved in your organization. Now, in certain organization, if it's a small organization, you might just not have any champion, you might just not have any defined master black belt or black belt in your organization, and you might be solely leading that particular function in your organization. So this is a guideline, not necessarily done this way, right? So it's a guideline from a larger perspective for a bigger companies which have a very structured approach. But then if it's a smaller company where you're just initiating a function and you are the whole and sole owner, then define it as per your requirement. All right, so structured approach, a starting point. So starting point is defined by the champion or the process owner. They define, the starting point, which project should be taken up, which depends upon the cycle time, defects, cost, revenue, complaints, compliance, safety. What are the KPIs for each one of these, and which KPI you need to work on, right? So that defines your starting point. Okay. Structured approach snapshot. So you look at the KPIs, and based on the KPIs, what are the different KPIs? What influences the KPIs? Are we able to, what are the different factors which influence those KPI performances? And do we have them in control? If we have the actionables levers in control, then great. If we don't have them control, and if it's bound to go out of control, we have lesser control at this point of time, then that can be one of the candidate for the project. What is the business case? Business case communicates a need why the project in terms of meeting the business objective, right? Why the project has to be done. If we don't do this project, what would happen to the business? What is at stake? Right? Why should the project be done at the first place? How is it going to impact the customer? Right? Today, what is the problem that the customer is facing, and how eventually it will impact the customer? Now, the customer could be your end users, it could be your process owner, it could be your employees. Which customer it's impacting for? Right?
Right.
Business case development, you need to develop the business case to be able to get that vetted from your process owner and justified the existence of your project. When we develop the business case needs to describe the benefit for undertaking the project, right? Does this project align with the other business initiatives? Do we have any other business initiatives where this project gets aligned to it? What is the focus that we have for the current project team that we are formulating? What impacts will this project have on other units, other business units and employees? Is it positive? If positive, can you measure it? If measurable, how much, right? What benefits will be derived from the project? Has the value of the project been quantified? It's always very, very important that you need to quantify the benefits, right? In Six Sigma, you need to quantify the benefits, or rather in any project, you need to quantify. If you don't measure, it's going to be very difficult for you to justify at a later stage, the improvements that you have brought on the table.
Right.
The example of business case. So this is the example of the business case. During FY 2005, the first call resolution efficiency for new customer hardware was 89%. What is the problem? Where the problem is, and where are we today? So baselining. This represents now what is the extent of the problem. This represents a gap of 8% from the industry standard of 93%. Why this project has to be taken up? Because we are below the industry standard. What is the overall loss which is happening? That amounts to, that's monetized, right? That's measurable number.
Right.
US 200,000 or $2 million of annualized cost impact. So this is the business case template which can be utilized to develop your own business case. Whenever you're developing the business case for your projects, you can utilize this template. Where can you find this template? It's in your books, right? The book which has been, it's in the course material which has been given out to you by, that's Knowledge Hut. In the same content, you have this business case template, and also you can probably capture the screen right now and create your own template. Now, in your organizations, you might be having slightly different template. If at all you have, go ahead and utilize it. This is just, again, a guideline. A problem statement which you need to describe. Business cases, what would happen, why we should take up this project. What is the problem? What are we focusing on is the problem statement. What's the pain, right? That's a problem statement. So we need to put up how big is the problem, where the problem is occurring, how much is the extent of the problem. if I let, what's the impact of the problem? If I reduce it, what will happen? If I increase it, what will happen? If the same is lit over there, then what would happen? What's going to be the impact, right? So that's a problem statement. The example of problem statement, we have two listed out over here so that we get complete clarity about what has to be documented. So poor example is fatal accuracy score is at 80%. Now it's quantified, but again, what's the problem over here? Against a client target of 95%. So you have put, against the target, where are we today? And we need to improve it. Now we are saying that poor. Why we are saying that poor? Let's look at the improved version of it. Fatal accuracy score, which was not mentioned, which has to be mentioned what, when, right? So when was not mentioned. What is the baseline that you have taken? Are you looking at the historical information for last 1 year, 2 year? You have not mentioned it in the first example or in the first problem statement example. This quarter has been observed to be at 80% for the last 4 months, right? So that's the extent of the problem against the client target of 95%, which has significant impact on the customer satisfaction. What is it impacting? We have a KPI, but what is it impacting, right? So that's also has to be mentioned. Problem statement, when we prepare it, the key considerations has to be given about, is the problem based on the observations or assumptions? So is it quantified, or we just are assuming it? Does the problem statement prejudge a root cause? If there is a prejudged root cause, then it's not a good candidate for Six Sigma project. If you have the root cause, you know the problem, you have a solution, go ahead and implement it. Always remember, you will never do a Six Sigma project for a problem where you have a solution, right? If solution is there and you know that the solution is going to work, implement it. Why do you need to go and spend so much of money and completing all those templates, completing all those tests, right? It's only done to have a structured approach towards finding a solution and then implementing it with the reduced minimal cost. Can data be collected by the team to verify, analyze the problem? Again, very important, because data has to be analyzed at the future stage. If it cannot be collected for the past, for past, can be collected in the future? Yes, your answer would be yes. We can collect it, but how easy it is? Is it too time-consuming exercise, or is it too costly an exercise? That might also be the situation. So try and find it out. Is the problem statement too narrowly or broadly defined? Is the solution included in the statement? What customers be happy if they knew we were working on this? Or rather, would customers be happy if they know that we're working on that? All right, so what is the scope? Scope is very, very important for a project. General guideline is, we say that you need to always ensure that the project is not scoped beyond it should not run beyond 6 months. Now, that's a guideline. Doesn't mean that you have to follow it. It's not a hard and fast rule. Some of your projects might run up to 1 year. Some of the projects might be completed in 3 months, 2 months. That's fine, right? The general guideline is given because what we have seen is, from our experience, we have seen that beyond a certain period of time, the process owner, the people, they tend to, even the team members, they tend to lose the interest in the project, right? So that should not happen. Once you have initiated the project, try and ensure that it gets completed as soon as possible. Don't take too much into the plate, because the way I want to explain this is, it's the best way I think it is explained. You cannot boil the entire ocean at once, right? And if you try to, how much time period it's going to take? It's going to take humongous number of years. Would you be able to do it? Maybe not in your lifetime. Versus 1 gallon at a time? Yeah, you can do it. You can substantially show those benefits as well, right? So that's scoping. Scope for ensure that your scope is prepared, and you don't include, it's clearly defined what is out of scope, so that there are no disputes later on. The Six Sigma project is not done to ensure that you have all the problems eliminated. It's done to ensure the problem that is mentioned, the problem statement, is eliminated and is resolved or optimized, right? The performance is optimized. Only to cater to that particular problem, not everything in the entire world, right? So what the process will, what processes will the team focus on? We need to mention it over here. What are the boundaries? What resources are available to the team? What if anything is out of bound? What if any constraints must the team work under? What is the time commitment expected of the team members? That again is very important, because time is money. People are hired to do their regular job. You need to pull them out of their current job, and their current job is going to suffer. So it should not happen that their manager comes and says that your performance is suffering, right? So there should be a clear commitment from the process owner, the managers, about the time commitment which has to be given from the people to your project, right?
Right.
8 steps to scope the project. You need to identify the customer, define the customer's expectation and the need, clearly specify your deliverables tied to those expectations, and then finally identify CTQs for those deliverables. All right. After this, we will go ahead and map your process, determine where in the process the CTQs can be most seriously affected. We need to evaluate which CTQs have the greatest opportunity for improvement, and then define the project to improve CTQs you have selected, right? What is importance? Why is it important for scoping? I think we have just discussed this now. It is very important to scope it well, because after a period of time, people are going to lose interest in your project if you have not scoped it properly. You yourself might lose interest in the project, and you might go off target. That's the first problem. The project becomes difficult to implement after if the scope is too high. Even after implementation, the desired significant benefits are not seen. So ensure that it's properly scoped so that you understand what would be the desired benefits and it's not too complex. Team focuses on trivial pain areas and misses out on the vital ones. Process selected is too or to handle or too small to realize breakthrough improvements. The goal statement, this is another critical part of the of the project charter. So the goal statement talks about what will happen, what are you trying to accomplish. So we need to definition of the improvement the team is seeking to accomplish. It starts with, we're going to reduce, we're going to eliminate, we're going to control, we're going to increase, right? So it generally starts with that. Tends to start broadly, which eventually should increase the measurable target and what is the completion date. Must not assign blame. Don't assign a blame at the moment, and you don't know as well, right? You might have an idea, but you don't really know. Don't assign a blame. If you know it, again, it's not a project, right? Presume cause, you don't know, or prescribe solution. If you have, no need to do the entire project, right? The goal has to be a SMART goal. What is SMART goal? It has to be specific. It has to be measurable. Otherwise, you cannot quantify the improvements, and there will be too much of too much of debate about have you brought improvement on the table or have you not. It has to be attainable. Don't overly estimate the the benefits which are going to be delivered. It has to be relevant, and it has to be time bound. This is an example of the goal statement. Let's go through the improved version of the example. So let's just go through the improved version. Increase the fatal accuracy from 80% to 95%. By when? By the end of first quarter 2005, right? So it has to be time bound. It has to be measurable. It has to be specific. It has to be attainable. This is again attainable. I'm not saying I would be going for the 100%, right? It has to be relevant. It has to be realistic, right? So that's a way of defining the goal statement. Milestones has to be mentioned when different when different phases, when would you be meeting the sponsor, when would you be meeting the process owner to define what is the progress of the project, when each phase of the project would be done. So we know that the project will have defined phase, measure phase, analyze phase, when it would be done. All that milestone has to be mentioned so that you stay on track, right? You can measure your performance against the milestones, and you can either speed up or it should not happen that you get stuck in the analysis paralysis, right? So you don't need over analysis. It has to be time bound. What is the financial evaluation? The financial evaluation establishes the value of the project, why it has to be done. So the components are impact. The components are impact, which has to be sustainable. Is it sustainable, or is it one-off? Is it going to give you the benefit just one-off, or is it going to deliver it over a period of time, and is it going to be year on year? Allocation, cost codes, accounting system, forecast, with how's the cash flow going to happen, realization schedule, and so on. Regarding the cash flow, I'm sure you might be aware of it, but some of you, if you're not aware of the cash flow, what I would recommend is just go through a couple of videos on YouTube, and you would be able to get a much better idea about the cash flow. Cash flow is a very easy concept, but if you're a seasoned project manager, I'm sure you are already well versed with that. Yes. All right, so benefit capture. Now, the benefits for which we have started the project has to be captured somewhere. right? And it has to be vetted by the finance team, that have you achieved the benefit or not. So we have a benefits capture template, which we have. There are two types of impact, one-off or sustainable. We have the cost codes allocate to the impact of the appropriate area in the books, and the forecast allowed for proper management of the projects and resources. Benefits capture, the basic guidelines are benefits should be calculated on the baseline of the key business performance, process performance that relate to the business measure or KPIs. The project measure, which is a primary metric, has to have a direct link between the process and its KPIs. Goals have to be defined realistically to avoid under or overstating. Benefits should be analyzed, right? So what is your analyzed benefit? That's how it should be put across. Benefits should be measured in accordance with the generally accepted accounting practices, which is also referred as GAAP. Benefits capture the categorization. The projects directly impact the income statement or the cash flow statement. Projects impact the balance sheet, which is the working capital. Project avoid expense or investment due to known or expected events in the future, which is cost avoidance. Generally, if you're doing any project which is going to give you the staff reduction, which we call it as FTE reduction, full-time employee reduction, helps you reduce the cost, which is cost avoidance. Impact on the balance sheet, the working capital, it might happen where, or the income flow, the cash flow, if you're doing a project which will eventually increase the customer satisfaction, you're going to get more orders, so that's where it will show. Depending upon where exactly the impact will show, you need to put it over there, right? You need to categorize it accordingly. Projects are risk management, insurance, safety, health, environment, and community-related projects which prevent or reduce severity of unpredictable events. All right, a good project has a problem and the goal statement clearly stated. Defect and opportunity definition is clearly understood. It does not pre-assume a solution. Otherwise, remember, it is not a project. Clearly relates to the customer and customer requirements, aligns to the business strategy and the objective, uses the tools effectively, and is always data-driven. Now, at times you might be doing, you might be having a data door approach, or you might be having a process door approach if it's, if the data is not available to you, right? Which is fine. The best project, the good project, is data-driven. If that's not possible, yeah, of course you can take up the process door approach as well. We have spoken about the process mapping earlier, but this is, a couple of slides that's dedicated towards process mapping to get a better idea about process mapping. So when we do process mapping, we need to exactly put what exactly is the process. When we need to define how the process looks like today, not how we think it is, not how we think it should be, but how it is happening today. That is how it will visually depict where are the problems, what are the additional unnecessary non-value-added steps that you have which can be eliminated. We have two type of process views. We might be having a functional view where each specific SME is giving you only his functions view. Process oriented we might be having, but you need to ensure that when you do the process mapping, it starts from how the value is flowing right from the top till the delivery to the customer, right? So that becomes your process map. Problems with the functional working, you have bottlenecks, repetition, bureaucracy, no ownership, management frustration, too many steps, customer might be forgotten, or opportunities for error or even corruption. From functional to the process, you need to take it. Successful re-engineering requires shift from the function to the process, which is where you're focusing more on the process, not on the function. You're not delivering, you're not working for the function, you're working for the customer, right? So
Right.
all the functions need to be allocated towards the customer's objective. Processes drive the business. Standard symbols which are used for process mapping. These are the standard symbols. We have a rectangle which indicates an activity, a diamond which depicts a decision point, arrow shows the connection and the direction of the flow, parallelogram shows that there are data, Ellipse shows at the start and the end of the process, and a circular circle with a letter or number indicates the continuation. Now, you might not be able to fit the entire flow chart in the process chart in one page, one A4 sheet. So in that situation, you might require connectors to be able to connect to the next A4 sheet, right? Process mapping levels, you might be having different levels where it is mentioned at a macro level, a very high level process map is prepared. A process map sometimes called the worker level or the viewpoint. This is where, how exactly the entire process is working. And then we have the micro process map as well, sometimes called as the improvement level or the viewpoint. Similar to a level 2, it will show more steps and tasks on it will be various performance data, yields, cycle time, value and non-value added time, defects, etc. All are mentioned over here. Which one you should do? All, right? Process map at a macro level will show you if there is any particular step which is not required. Process level, again, it will give you more details and it will help you eliminate the NVAs at a larger level. Micro level will eliminate any additional tasks, things which you are doing. Facilitating, prepare standard flowchart symbols. When you're doing it, you don't do it yourself, right? You have to do it with your team. So whenever you're doing it, then at that point of time, you would have to. All right, so whenever you are facilitating, you need to prepare, you need to use the standard flowchart symbols, bring people together who know the process to prepare, right? Let me apologize for the interruption. So that was because I had to just gulp a glass of water. All right. So
no worries.
When you are doing it, you don't have to do it yourself, and you should not be doing it yourself, right? You don't have to do it in silos. You have to do it along with the conjunction of your team members. Prepare for it, then execute it. Use group facilitation sessions with the process owner. Use individual interviews where appropriate. Document process and technology opportunities for improvement as you go. Understand cost, quality, and time, where processing time and elapsed time implications as you go. Questions that we need to ask regarding the process activity. Who are the customers of the process? Who performs each activity? What generates the process and the task? What forms and reports are used? What computer systems and files are used? How do we do it? Why do we do it? What decisions are made in the process? What happens next? What sequence are the activities performed in? Who reviews it and when and why? How long does it take, right? What is the nature, frequency, and cause of the error and the problems? How are errors, problems, exceptions handled today? What is the output? How many are the outputs? What does the output, where does the output go? Process mapping do's and don'ts. Let's talk about the do's. We need to do the map. We do the process as it is happening today, not how we think it should be, or now how we think our view of it, neither how it should be. We don't need to do it that way. Don't map the process as you think it happens or you think it ought to happen. Do think about the process across the entire organization. Do talk to other people who are involved in the process. Do define beginning and the end of the process before you start, so that you can then put the remaining connectors in between. Do ask questions to all the people. Let's talk about the don'ts. Don't restrict your process map to the activities in your own department. It's not a departmental, it's the entire process view. Don't work in vacuum. Don't attempt to process map before you identify a beginning and an end. Don't get bogged down with too much detail, right? So understand which kind of process map that you're preparing, macro level, process level, or the micro level. Don't struggle on your own. This is another example of depicting the process flowchart, which is cross-functional flowchart, also referred as the swim lane. How a particular how the value is flowing between the functions and how it eventually gets delivered to the customer. Cross-functional flowcharts, which is swim lanes, use workshops, focus groups to do it. Never do it alone. As we said earlier, it's very similar to the process map. Don't do it alone. Keep things moving. Always define start and the end, which is starting from the supplier or the customer, who's initiating the request and goes on to the customer back, where the delivery of the product or the outcome. Keep things moving. Encourage everyone to join in. Energize, share, and build. Use paper, brown paper technique, whiteboard, flip charts, PC-based tools, etc. Whichever you're comfortable with. Suggested steps in process mapping: start with the high level flow, that is the context diagram, and then drop to the next level of detail if necessary, which is sub processes. Define the beginning and the end of each sub process. Always stay focused. Define key inputs and outputs. Walk through each key sub process step by step. Don't waste the time. If you get bogged down, take a break or move on to another area. Right? Identify processes, process and technology opportunities for improvement as you go, or at the end of each sub-process. Verify the accuracy of the entire flow. Now we have covered the SIPOC also in the, at a very high level. Let's get into some more details about the SIPOC. What is SIPOC? SIPOC is supplier, input, processes, output, and the customer. Suppliers, people who provide inputs to the process. Inputs are information, material, etc., which goes into the process from some other group or people, which is supplier. Process is a series of activities, takes an input, adds value to it, and produces an output for a customer. Outputs is output of a process, creating a product or service that meets a customer need, and customer users of the output. So information flow and the measures, how do we have in SIPOC? The easiest way of understanding the SIPOC is understand from this perspective. Let's talk about the tea making process. Supplier, who is supplier? You have whichever store that you are buying the material from, that becomes your supplier. Then the inputs that you require for the tea is tea powder. You require the milk. You require sugar. You require water. Process, switch on the gas. Boil the water, add tea powder into it, and so on, right? Output is the tea, and the customer is me and my family, right? So that becomes the entire SIPOC. Why is it required? What is the output, and who requires that output? Who is going to provide me the inputs to be able to produce it, right? So look at the end-to-end view. That's the significance of SIPOC. SIPOC, to know who supplies inputs to the processes. And the process, to know what are the inputs to the process, to know the steps or step-by-step flow of the process, to know the output of the process, and to know the customer of the process. Steps, always attain a full understanding of all the steps of the process. This is done by looking at the process from the customer's point of view. Clearly define the process start and the end boundaries. Very similar to what we spoke about in the process mapping. Brainstorm list of all process steps, go on the floor, walk through the process, and interview people working on the process as needed. Recorded process steps using a sticky note method. In this method, each step in the process is recorded on a sticky note and built in front of the individual completing the work. Discuss, review, and modify process step sequence to agree on as-is process map. Add suppliers, inputs, outputs, and customers. Add input, process, and output measures as well. Right, so this is the SIPOC format. You have different suppliers listed down. What are the different inputs which are required? Process is pretty much the flow chart. Outputs, what is the output, and who's going to use it? Draw the SIPOC for your process. Right, so this is that's, I think, these are the details, additional details which I wanted to really share about, which will empower you to be able to go ahead and do the define phase on your own without taking much of help or mentorship from your black belts. So that's these additional tools are the things which we cover specifically into the green belt, right? We don't cover these additional details for the yellow belt because yellow belts are going to be the one who really provide you support. Green belts are the project leads. You're the project leader. You would need to be able to quantify the benefits. You would be able to need to understand from where the project has to be looked at or how to identify the project and so on, right? So let's now move forward and look at different expectations that we have out of what are the different expectations that we have out of the define phase. The project team has identified representing the key stakeholders. They have identified all the stakeholders. All the stakeholders indicate invested, impacted, and invented. That is your team members, who are people who are working in the project. The project plan has been created with some detail around the define with the measure phases, and the project team has been launched with clear expectations for all the members. all aspects of the project charter have been validated, which includes the benefits, benefit types and quantities are realistic. It has to be realistic, it has to be timely, it has to be achievable. The opportunity problem statement clearly indicates the process metrics, right? What is the process metric? The output which we're trying to improve. Now, if I have to explain what is the output and what's the difference here, let's say, let's say if I'm not feeling well, if I'm having fever, and if I go to a doctor, I tell the doctor that, I'm not really feeling well, I'm having fever. So if every time doctor gives me paracetamol, says that with paracetamol, you would be able to cure your fever, I really don't need to go to a doctor, right? I can do that myself. Why do I need to go to a doctor? Because I am not really sure of what is the root cause. And that is what the doctor is trying to identify. Fever is the output which I'm trying to reduce or which I'm trying to improve. What is the input? What are the different causes which is causing this fever? Inputs could be I'm working a lot, and because of that I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, or maybe because I have got some viral infection. So for that, blood test has to be done. I might be under influence of some sort of alcohol or something, too much of abuse of alcohol. So various factors could be there, right? So what are the inputs which cause the output to be problematic? And that's the problematic which we're trying to improve. The opportunity problem statements is the why. The goal statement focuses on the performance metric, that is the why, detailed in the opportunity problem statement, and the goals are always realistic. Don't over exaggerate. Don't try to reach the moon every time. The goals has to be realistic.
Right.
Requirements gathering to validate the why have been completed to validate the problem statement and the goal statement. A high-level process map, a SIPOC, and possibly a value stream map, if possible, has been completed. Value stream map is nothing but it's a stream of how the value is flowing inside the project. It details about what are the value-added steps. How much time, what is the touch time of the value-added steps, and what is the non-value-added time. So what is the overall lead time, how much of time the overall experience time of the customer versus the value time. Stakeholder analysis and communication plan have been completed, and the project risks have been identified, and risk management plan is put in place. Then eventually we go and get the toolkit review done with, for the project. Main objective is define the project. We have prepared the project charter. We have prepared the SIPOC. Tailgate questions that we need to ask is, does the problem statement detail the problem when and where the pain occurs? Does the goal statement define the metric to improve? Does the improvement target seem achievable? Are the project scope and timelines reasonable? Have constraints and key assumptions been identified? Does the expected benefit, business impact still justify the project? Have the customers been identified? What are their requirements? Are they measurable? How were the customer requirements determined? Who is on the team? Do they all understand the elements of the project charter? Right? So these are things which we answer. Who are the key stakeholders? How will they be involved in the project? How will the progress be communicated? What are the potential barriers and obstacles to success? Now, this question we ask in all the toolkit reviews. What are the potential barriers and obstacles to success so that we can eliminate them? And how are they being addressed? Tools and methodologies that have been applied over here is SIPOC, supplier input, process output, customer, voice of the customer, POC, stakeholder analysis to understand the needs and the requirements of the stakeholders, and how do I manage those stakeholder requirements, how do I meet those requirements, communication plan, and the project plan, right? And with that, my friend, we complete
the define phase. Now, if I have to put it simple to make you understand what is the objective of the define phase, it is applicable everywhere, not just in the organization. Let's say at home there is a couple, and the wife and husband, they are staying together along with the kids, and let's say the ownership of any kind of analysis of what can be improved is taken by the wife. Who are the different stakeholders here? Here the wife is there, right? She is staying in the house, and her husband and kids, They are the stakeholders. Stakeholder, the basic meaning of stakeholder is anyone who's interested in the outcome, right? Uh, one, the wife can speak to her husband directly. She can say, she can ask, so what do you think this year we should do? What differently we should do this year, right? What is your focus area? Maybe the husband might say, we have not been able to save a lot of money. We are living very comfortable with, but our savings are not that great. So that's one area which has to be improved, right? Define phase is only where we are defining where do we want to work on. This is one situation where the stakeholder himself is saying what he's going to work on, right? In our organization, we can always go to the process owner and ask, what is your focus this year, right? So same example I've quoted at the home as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where the wife is asking, what should we focus on this year? And the husband is saying savings. Similarly, in the process, when you go in to speak to the process owner, he might say that this year, I think I would want to increase I would want to reduce my defects, or I would want to increase my margin, or I would want to produce more with lesser money. Whatever is the focus, that will give you an idea about what your project should be. That's one. But it might happen, right, when the wife goes and speaks to her husband, he says that, I don't know, we are just doing fine. So no information came out. Does that mean the wife should not do anything? Maybe not. Second approach is, a lot of times when we get hired in a company as a process, as a process consultant or as a process improvement executive, there initially we will get to know from the process owner what we should work upon. But sometimes we might not be able to. So in that situation, you can speak to other stakeholders. You can speak to the kids, right? Kids might say, well, I think, can you start teaching me more, right? So maybe same, if you go to process owner is not able to tell me anything, then I can go to customers. I can go to my employees. They will be another source of information who can tell me if my process owner is not telling me anything.
Right.
If that also doesn't work, then I can look at the process map, right? I can find out how my process is functioning today, right? The same example, if I quote it back into the home, you can always look at your records and find out, all right, so last year we have been able to save this much, these many dollars. This year we are not making much progress, and over last couple of years our savings are depleting. Right, so it looks like we should focus on this one. It was not coming out, but only when you did your own data analysis, it came out. That is where process map, SIPOC, these kind of things comes into picture, where nobody is giving you any information, neither employees is giving, neither customer is giving, nor process owner is giving. Does that mean you sit free? No. It just means that you have to hunt for opportunities. Right? So defined phase is where you have to define the problem where you need to work on. And sometimes it's going to be obvious, sometimes not. If it's obvious, if it's in front of you, go and tackle it. If it's not, then you have to find out through process map. You might have to find out through SIPOC, right? You would have to use these kind of tools. Eventually, the goal over here is to find out what are we going to do, right? What are we going to do? Why are we going to do it? What is the problem statement, and what is the pressing need? Project, end of the day, if we do, it's a cost. So why should we do it? What is the investment? What is the benefit approximately, right? So what's the business case, right? So that's the objective of define phase. Even further, if I have to simplify, I'm just defining what I want to work on. As I was saying earlier as well, let's say I have fever. I want to get rid of fever. That's a definition. Right, so that's the entire objective of this define phase. Make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.